Next Radio with Broadcast Bionics. Innovative solutions for creative people.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
All right, we're here today to talk to you about fundraising, but just for the purposes of this particular session, indulge us a little by referring to my colleague here as Father Paul, and you can refer to me as Sister Charmaine, or if you prefer, Mother Superior. I'm just going to promote myself slightly. So we've called this session for what we're about to receive, and I'd like you to, again, indulge me. Can I get an amen? Amen. Come on, thank you. Amen? All right, don't worry, we're not going to do the call and response, and it's not a preach, I promise you. We are here just to talk to you today about fundraising and try and show you why it is our listeners support Premier financially and how we encourage them to continue to support us. Because for Premier Christian Radio, listener support is key, it's critical to our survival.
Now, as you know, many radio stations hold their own charity appeals, but we hope that the tips that we're going to share with you today will help you raise more money for your own charities if you do run an appeal.
So Premier's mission is to put faith at the heart of our listeners' daily lives and to bring Christ to their local communities. In many ways, I guess you could say that, as our strapline says, Premier is a place where faith really does come to life.
For many people, Premier is their church. Our programming brings comfort and hope to thousands and thousands of people. Some are lonely, some are bereaved, some are going through divorce, some are just looking for something a bit more meaningful in their lives. And we like to think of it that when you talk on Premier, you're talking to the biggest church congregation in the country.
So we're slightly larger than people think. Many times we have church leaders coming through our doors and they're surprised by what Premier looks like. We've got offices in London, based in Westminster. Our studios are there, actually. But we've also got offices in the northeast, in Scotland, in the Midlands, where I'm from, Birmingham, and Sussex as well. We employ over 100 people, not including our volunteers and freelancers, of course. And we broadcast nationally on DAB and Freeview, across London and the southeast on AM as well.
And Premier, believe it or not, is 20 years old this year. We celebrated our birthday at St. Paul's Cathedral, magnificent place to be in. If you've never been there, you should definitely go. And it was a tremendously successful occasion. There were 2,000 invited guests and VIPs. There were hymns, Bible readings, drama. There was singing, obviously, and there was an address from the Bishop of London, the Right Reverend Richard Charteris, who chose as his theme the very apt one of the importance of communication in the church.
So let me ask you, what do you imagine when you think of a Christian broadcaster? I bet you've all got some thoughts if you haven't listened to Premier Christian Radio yet. Are you thinking perhaps you've got a few nuns and vicars running amok on the breakfast show, maybe? Maybe a bit of Father Ted on the afternoon show, possibly Kenny Everett, if you remember him, with some brotherly love on the drive time show. Yeah, you remember that? Well, there's probably a little bit of that in small but more contemporary doses, in truth. But actually, Premier Christian Radio, our focus is on high-quality speech. Every weekday lunchtime, we have a 1 hour news program, 1 hour news program looking at the issues of the day. We also focus on political analysis and look at current affairs issues. Moral and ethical matters are debated and discussed on a regular basis. Just last week, as most of you probably were, we were discussing in quite a lot of detail the assisted dying bill, and there are very diverse views among the Christian community that we're broadcasting to. But we also do the regular life issues. So, as Paul alluded to, we look at stress, dealing with singleness, dealing with parenting, the parents who are struggling with how to cope with their children, whether it's because they're on their own or because the children are dabbling in drugs. So we're there to support them through our programming and other resources that we have to offer. So we do quite a lot in those areas. But underpinning all of that, Premier also reflects the life and the vibrancy of the church here in the UK and around the world. As you'd expect, we reflect what happens in the church on a Sunday or a weekday. So there are Bible teaching programs which are hugely popular. There's music that's reflected of the church, inspirational thoughts, prayers. All of that encompasses what Premier offers to its audiences. Now I've gone off-piste, and I shouldn't do that. Sorry, we've got star presenters as well.
We have our star presenters, Pam Rhodes from Songs of Praise on the BBC, Roger Bolton from Radio 4, and also Anne Widdecombe, not only former MP, but also former star of Strictly. But Premier isn't just about radio. 400,000 people read our 3 magazines that we publish. 300,000 people receive our free Voice of Hope devotional magazine. There are 630,000 visitors to our website each month. We have an app. We have a YouTube channel which contains content made in our own TV studios with our own presenters. And there are nearly 4 million downloads, or there have been nearly 4 million downloads of our Christians versus Atheists podcast debate series called Unbelievable.
Like
Yes, it does get a bit violent in that studio sometimes. Audience measurement, we use 2 systems. We use the new Audience Net, audio monitor from Audience Net, which is the system that was launched here last year at Next Radio by Jonathan Arendt. And I'll tell you more about that in a second. We also have Radar. We're only Radar in London. Our latest sweep shows that we have 175,000 listeners in London. The Audio Monitor research is the new independent survey of 3,169 people across the UK, across all platforms, across all genres, all devices, online, on air. And we're very pleased today to announce that our first UK-wide audience figures, Audio Monitor gives us a 2.1% reach of the population, which translates into 1.3 million listeners across the UK. So we're very pleased with that.
Yes, that's great news for us. And as you've heard, Premier is reaching a lot of people in ways that many stations can't because of the things that we do. But let's go back to revenue. About 40% of our income comes through traditional advertising, irregular ad spots, and sponsorship. The rest of it, though, comes from listener donations and their legacy. So it's a really interesting mix for our station in terms of our income. We're owned by a non-profit charitable trust, and its turnover last year was in the region of 7.5 million. We're on course this year to rise that to £10 million in a year. We run, alongside our other charity appeals, we work with all sorts of smaller charities, but we run 2 radiothon campaigns, at least 2 radiothon campaigns a year, and each one raises a staggering £400,000 each time. So this is really key to our income.
So how do we do it? Well, we have 5 tips for you, but Charmaine's just going to tell you that the most important thing is to do it in this way.
Yes, it is. So we know that our listeners, I'm not staying to the script at all, sorry. We know that our listeners will give if you ask them in the right way, in the right time, with the right reason for interrupting their day. You have to give them a really compelling reason to give and connect with them on an emotional level. What is it about this service that means so much for them? Is it about just themselves, or how they can see it benefiting other people in their local facility, their local communities? And it does mean that you have to give them, therefore, an immediate call to action. They've got to call now. There's a reason for that. And that way, when you do that, you've also got to make sure that you give them clear deadlines and a call to action.
So here are our tips on how we do it. And the first tip is to tell stories. And it's very important to use stories and testimonials from people who've benefited from your radio station or your appeal. And here are a few of ours.
My husband passed away in 2007. Sometimes friends will call me and say, listen to Premier, and I'll say to them, I'm listening already. When you hear other people's stories, you just think, okay, I can't give up now, I must continue.
I was a drinker quite most of my life, drinking quite a lot, and I was battling giving it up. I found Premier when I was rolling about, in my bed. I was in such turmoil from coming off everything. So without Premier, I wouldn't be sitting here now, would I?
There is no greater heartbreak or loss than to lose a child. Well, of course, this is the worst day of your life, the worst day for any parent. That companion was the companion that I needed and still do.
I got one radio by my bed, I got one in the kitchen, and I got one hung in the bathroom. So I don't miss anything. They are my family.
I spent my professional life, 44 years, nursing. But with Premier, you've got a greater impact because they've only got to turn the radio on.
Tip number 2 is to note that size isn't everything, Paul. It really isn't. Break your appeal down into bite-sized chunks, because that is slightly awful. Sorry, he told me to say it. Break your appeal target down into bite-sized chunks. That way, your listener will feel that the target, the end goal, is far more achievable.
Tip number 3 is when asking for donations, it's all about them, the listeners, not you. You need to use language that reflects how the appeal will benefit them, such as how if they make a donation, how it might keep their favourite programme going.
Tip number 4, maintain focus. Really plan your appeal programming. Don't allow your presenters, and it does sound counterintuitive, but don't allow your presenters to go off-piste and have too much fun. We all know here that engaging content is fantastic, it's what radio is all about, but it can, in an appeal, be at the expense of your listener giving and supporting your cause. So try and make sure that the presenters deliver clear messages, clear calls to action in every single link.
And tip number 5 is to make donors feel special. When people give £100 in a Premier appeal, they become a Premier Centurion. It makes them feel a part of a club.
So finally, there is one more thing that is really important, and of course you'd expect me to say that prayer works. Well, of course we do that. But for the general rule, it's always really important to do one more thing.
Which is to thank everyone, so
thank you.
Thank you.